Welcome to Rich Dad Stockcast with Andy Tanner. We have a great show today, and Andy, what I want to do is I want to tell you about a quote that I read from Charlie Munger.
One of my favorite people.
Beautiful. And then I really want to get your reactions because there's one or two things in here that I just want to make sure that I guess I'm asking if you're in sync with Charlie Munger. So here's the quote. And personally, I think you're going to find it upsetting. So here we go. Charlie Munger says, the big money is not in the buying and the selling, but in the waiting. High returns don't actually require high effort.
Boy, I couldn't agree more with Mr. Munger on that. And I think it's well said. I think what he's talking.
Wait, it sounds like he's saying buy and hold, which is absolutely what you don't do. You want a cash flow and you're doing your options. That's not buy and hold, is it?
Absolutely. 100%. Let's talk about real estate. And this is important because you have several types of real estate, but let's put it in two categories. Let's put people in one category that want to flip. So they want to buy and sell. Now, if you're buying and selling constantly, you're really not building an asset column. You're trying to build a pile of cash rather than, say, income producing assets, right? You're not accumulating a business. You're not accumulating real estate. People that buy and hold real estate, they buy it and they hold it and they collect the rent. So that's cash flow, right? People that flip don't worry so much about the rent because they're trying to make money on the sale. So we could put stock folks in the same two categories. There's the people that want to buy low, sell high, buy low, sell high, buy low, sell high all the time. And then there's the people that like to collect dividends and premium, by and large. Now, I might get called out if I sell a covered call, but my preference would be not to most of the time. And so, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, what is not to like? I mean, if we picture and imagine, someone at a gala and they pull up in a Ferrari or, a Rolls Royce, and someone gets out of the Rolls Royce and they say, wow, who's that? And they say, oh, she's so-and-so, she owns the Coca-Cola company. That would absolutely sound like a great life to me. Someone who, they own Apple, right? They own Apple. Oh, they own ExxonMobil, whatever, Chevron. It's Paris Hilton. She's from the Hilton, she's an heiress because she's going to inherit all this Hilton ownership, right? And so that's really what being wealthy is owning companies. I can't imagine, this is an overused metaphor, but I'm going to keep pounding on it until folks say, oh, I got it, is if I said, hey, here's a golden goose, would you like to buy the golden goose? You say, yes. I go, why do you want the goose? And nobody is going to say, because I think the price of the goose might go up next week and I can sell it. You're always after the eggs every time. I mean, in the fable of the golden goose, there's not even a thought of selling the goose. They get greedy for more eggs and kill it, trying to get more eggs out too quickly. But the thought never enters our mind of selling our asset that produces the cash flow. So I agree with Charlie Munger pretty much every time he speaks.
So for clarity, he's not saying buy low, hold, and sell high. That is not what he's saying.
Yeah,
but before you answer, there is a guy in the comment section. I wish I could remember his name, but he says, please make sure you tell the golden goose story in every episode. And
I didn't catch that one.
He's starting to count how many times you do it. So I highly recommend everybody in the comment section, let's count how many times Andy
I don't know if he was being facetious, but the reason I think I would tell it every time is if you turn on CNBC, like Jim, buy, sell, bear, blah, blah, blah. It's got all those buttons and it's wonderful entertainment. I think Munger's saying we don't need a console of, 30 buttons to hit. It's entertaining. But if like they're never going to sell Coca-Cola, they'll never sell that stock. It's a great company. They sell $1 billion worth of beverages every day, over $1 billion every day. If they raise the price by a penny, they become even more filthy, stinking, vulgar rich. And so if you can find a company that is paying you, I mean, think about their cost basis. I think their cost basis, that stock's paid for itself 1,000 times for them, but I think their cost basis is like $3.25. And I think that the dividend's probably like $1.60, or probably it's probably 40. I own it. I should know, but I can't recall it off the top of my head. But I think the dividend's like $1.60. So every 2 years, that thing has been paid for itself. That thing's paid for itself so many times. Why would you ever sell? If you had something that cost you $3 and it gave you $1.60 every single year, why would you ever sell that? It's paid for itself a million times. So,
right.
I think the other thing about Munger, well, maybe you're going to bring this up later, but it's the idea. It isn't just the hold. I don't think he's talking about buying and holding. I think he's talking about buying and reinvesting more than anything else. I mean, compounding.
Yeah, he talks about the power of compounding and how patience pays off.
Yeah.
Can we dig into compounding? Because I always thought it was you buy a stock, you take your profits, and then you buy more of that same stock with it. So you're only your compounding is only within the same stock that you originally bought. Is that accurate?
No, I think what compounding, and if you were to use a word synonymous, would be reinvestment. So you can, when you receive money, like let's say at a rental house, okay, and let's say that I get some rent from it. I could do a couple of things with that rent. Number one, I could spend it. Okay, so that's not compounding. You take the money and you go spend. The other part is I could take that money and pay down the mortgage, which that would be a form of compounding because I'm taking profits and reinvesting it, buying back more of that property. Or I could take it and put it towards a different property. That'd still be compounding. So when you take profit and you reinvest and buy more asset, whatever that asset might be, that's compounding. It's when you reinvest earnings. And the reason that creates a wealth explosion is because every time you get a golden egg, you're putting it towards more golden goose, which produces more eggs than you had the day before, right? Which produces more golden, goose that lays the golden eggs than you had before. And so, it's really tough not to become wealthy when you're buying more machines that create cash, because you're going to be creating more cash tomorrow than you did yesterday. And the beautiful part about it is the wealth explosion. There's a wonderful documentary on HBO about Warren Buffett. I think it's called Becoming Warren Buffett. And it's a biography. It's pretty well done. It's really fun it's a very simple documentary, and that's Warren Buffett's style. He's not flashy. He lives in a nice home, but not what you think. He goes through the drive-through at McDonald's every morning. If the market's up, he gets a bacon, egg, and cheese, or a sausage McMuffin. If the market's down, he gets a bacon, egg, and cheese, or whatever it is. And he's just a very simple man. And I think that obviously they're more brilliant than I'll ever be. Their IQs are off the chart. But I'll tell you, I think the thing that often overshadows their brilliance overshadows their temperament. And they're just easygoing. Warren Buffett spent most of his day reading and gaining information. And so he makes a few moves every year. He doesn't trade stock every day. He makes a few moves every year, and they're very thoughtful moves. Right. So, the idea of compounding and reinvestment creates a wealth explosion. So my family and I, my kids particularly, my two sons, we've watched that documentary more than once. But as we watched it, we said, let's do what Warren Buffett did. Let's play with a compounding calculator. You can go to investor.gov is a good one.
Let's challenge our producer, because our producer's Crackerjack, which is kind for a badass.
Crackerjack.
Sarah, are you able to pull that up?
Look at that. Bam. Now I have to make this. I have no eyes, so I have glasses, so I got to bring this up on my screen. Okay. Throw in $1,000. Initial investment, $1,000.
Okay.
And let's not
contribute
anything, just zero. We're not even going to make a 401k contribution. So put in a zero in monthly contribution, zero. Okay, length of time. If you work from 20 and you die at 85, you got 65 years of compounding. Okay, estimated rate 8% is what the stock market and the S&P usually gives. Okay, we'll go with that. Okay, now let's go 2.5 here. And this is John Bogle's example.
Tell what that is. So now he's going 2.5 on interest rate.
Yeah, and all I'm saying is this is really an education issue. And what we're going to do is we're going to see three graphs. We're going to see one at 8, we're going to see one at 5.5, we're going to see one at 10.5. So you calculate that over your life, okay? So you got a result of the red line is 148,000. That's what you get. Now think about this. This is why I did that webinar called Double Your Cash Flow. This is why this is important. If I am investing at 8%, I get 148,000. So for every $1,000 you started out with, it's got a potential at 8% of 148. If you give those fees to Wall Street, and we'll talk about this in the second half of the show. If you give your fees to Wall Street, you're going from 148 to 32. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So the first thing I'm going to tell you,
why
because you're giving fees to Wall Street, right? If I'm earning 8 and then I give 2.5 to them in fees, my net return is 5.5, right?
Okay, so that was the variance in the
correct.
Okay, gotcha.
So if you give them 2.5%, or what, you'll have to figure out what your costs are. But Bogle uses, the founder of Vanguard uses 2.5. So I'm going to go with what the founder of Vanguard said. But you're losing. They get 80% of the money is gone. Look at that, 148 to 32. That's an 80%, $116,000 difference. $116,000 on 2.5% over your life, right? That's on $1,000. And surely you got more than 1,000 in your 401k you're putting in. Now look at this. So if you take back that 2% and get the full 8, and then you get some financial education and you double that again, right? You instead of 2%, you go to 4. Now you're at 10%. Now you're at like 600 grand or what? I can't see it. My eyes are
you're at $659,000.
So you tinker with this, right? And you tinker with time. You tinker with time. You tinker with the rate. So this is what Buffett used to do on a slide rule, right? He would get out a slide rule and he would play with numbers as a kid. And he would graph it out on paper. He didn't have these tools we have. And as a kid, he figured out how long it would take him to have all the money that was in the world and stuff like that. He'd make these crazy calculations, like what would my compounding rate need to be to take over the universe, right? And so, you can plug in different numbers in that. Watch this. If you go back up, let's put in $10,000. And let's say my sons do the traditional route of school and they're going to become an engineer at 100 grand a year and they're going to put $1,000 a month into their 401k or whatever. And they're going to do that for 45 years because they're going to retire at 65. So let's go 45 instead. Okay, just do the same 8%. And my kids don't even know anything, let's pretend. Calculate. And this is how I got them excited about financial education. Okay, the red line's 4 million. I said, if you can learn to get to, I said, son, if you can learn to get just 2% more, you will double that number if you go from 8% to 10.5. And I taught them how to do that by writing this thing called a covered call, right? I showed them how to do it. They have never missed a month writing covered calls since, and they're teenagers, right? Because once they saw that graph, they're like, oh, if I can pull another 2.5% a year, that's like that. Disclaim, risk and disclaim. But I'm telling you, covered calls can produce a lot more than freaking an extra 2% a year. I'm telling you, absolutely, in my mind. And so you learn to manage the risks and you play with these calculators and create yourself, the compounding. So to me, that's exciting stuff. Go play with that compounder. And we can talk more in the second half of the show about cutting out Wall Street. How do you could combine this with some kind of leverage. There's a lot of stuff you can do to accelerate this. But that's the compounding. So
That is incredible. And Andy, on that one, it was 45 years instead of 65. So that makes it much more realistic for even people like me as we get older.
Here's your problem though. Go back to it if you would, Sarah. Here's your problem though. All right, let's go back to the top. Here's your problem. Watch this. So remember those numbers. It was $5 million, right? Around 5 million, right? Okay, now let's give someone 100 grand, 10 times the amount, 100 grand. And let's say they can only contribute 500 because they're strapped. They're old and they're strapped for cash, 500. And let's say they've got 10 years to go. This is why he talks about the patience. Now hit calculate. Watch this. It'll be like probably $300,000 or something. Yeah, see? 300 grand.
Oh, wow.
So it goes. So the time starting now. That's why I tell my kids, Buffett started when he was 14. You guys got to start when you're 14, right? You got to start at the same time he did, because you don't want to lose that 10 years of 14 to 24, right? You don't want to wait till you're 24. Do what Buffett did. Start right away. Start compounding. Start learning how to write your calls, learning how to collect your dividends. Let's get going. But you can see that graph is much less exciting. So if you're in that situation, 1-2 punch, got to have leverage. You've got to lever in some way. And the two most powerful wealth building forces I know of are compounding on the asset column and leverage on the liability column. And you've got to use both. So we'll talk more about why, like corporate pensions don't use either one. So there's your compounding.
Right. Thanks for showing us, Andy. And Sarah, thanks for being able to get that.
Thank you, Sarah. That was impressive. On the fly.
Boom.
That's one of the reasons I don't like corporate pensions, because there's no compounding in it.
Right. Quick question before you dig into that. Actually, I have a few things. One, I want to make sure everyone knows this is not financial advice. I try to say this every show. Often I forget, but we're almost saying you need to compound. And so I want to make sure that Andy needs to compound. Greg would like to compound, but that doesn't mean you should be doing this, because we don't know your situation. We don't. Yeah. We'd love to know you, but we don't. And so we can't give you just blanket information. So please understand, this is education, not advice.
For sure.
One more thing. Jump in the comment section. Let us know what you think. Give us show ideas, and that would be wonderful. But Andy, before we go too deep, I think you mentioned to me earlier you had a webinar once that you called Double Your Income.
This would be the perfect webinar to complement this section, and we'll talk more about this maybe after the break, because like people say, this is the problem people have with a discussion on compounding. They roll their eyes, say, "Oh, compounding again. Oh, I know compound." Well, how much did you compound? Like, right. Did you compound yesterday? Did you have money that you got from an investment that you reinvested either into more of that investment or another? Did you compound yesterday? Are you doing it? Yes or no? And for the vast majority of people, the answer is either no, I'm not doing it at all, or I'm doing it at a really rough rate. And people should double their cash flow, because if you double the income, like from your stocks or from your real estate, if you could double that, if you can increase that number, you're reinvesting more and your compounding goes faster. I think everyone should learn how to increase their cash flow, because an increase of cash flow means an increase of compounding if you reinvest.
And that's what you mean by double your income. You're compounding. You're getting your initial one, and then you're using that to get into your second one. Oh, so I just want to clarify one thing for the audience, but also for myself. So for you, compounding is taking the profits and reinvesting in another asset, but that asset can be any asset as long as it's laying its golden eggs.
Yeah, I mean, you're everything to me. When I teach, I use what I call a cash flow jack in the box, and it's a little jack in the box with a handle. Instead of a puppet that comes out when you finish the song, cash earnings comes out. So you basically have three things that you have: the price of the box to buy the box, you have the crank, which is the work that it does, and then you have the cash flow that it earns. So every time you have a cash flow jack in the box that spits out cash, what do you do with that cash? You buy another cash flow jack in the box. Now you have two boxes going. Now they both crank. Now what do you do with that? Oh, go buy two more. And that's the compound. That's what compound effect is it's an exponential increase in the number of, the amount of asset that you own, the amount of cash flow boxes that you have and the amount of cash they spit out.
So I've got another question that Charlie Munger said in this article. And he
Yeah.
said, when it comes to investing, continuous tinkering and frequent trading are not always beneficial. Instead, a well thought out strategy coupled with patience often yields the best results. So by tinkering, he's not saying take your investments and reinvest like compounding. It sounded a little bit like he was speaking out of both sides there.
Well, there's the idea of passive income is not to do much. I mean, that's really what the word passive versus active is, right? And our whole goal is to do less stuff anyway. And there's two particular emotions that cause people to tinker. The first one is greed, where they're like, well, I want to make more, and I'm looking for the bigger, better deal all the time, right?
Yep.
It's kind of like, I think I have the most wonderful wife in the world. My eyes are closed to the rest of the world. There's nothing out there that I want to tinker with, because what I have, I think is absolutely fabulous. But some guys, no, I always want more. I got to find the bigger, better deal. I'm going to look around. And in doing that, you might sacrifice the thing that is very precious. So looking for the bigger, better deal, saying, well, yeah, Apple's a great company, but I think I'll sell that. And here's this startup, and that one might be huge. We don't need to tinker with stuff. What I love is, I have a thing in my academy we call the Power Six.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does is it helps you build a blueprint that achieves your goals. And that's really important, because, if my goal is to have a certain lifestyle and I have a blueprint that gets me that lifestyle, why am I tinkering with it? Why am I tinkering? If it gets, like, a lot of people say, Andy, what do you think of this investment? What do you think of that? I go, well, I'm not interested. Why not? You want to make money? I go, well, I'm good with what I'm doing. I'm on track with what I'm doing. I'm fine with that, right? So greed can cause tinkering. The other thing that causes tinkering is panic and fear.
Right.
It is so easy. I think the best year I loved it the most. It was sad because socially we were in a lot of pain in coronavirus, masks, and, couldn't see anybody, and everyone's dying and all this stuff. It was terrible that way. But from an investment standpoint, it was glorious.
Right.
Because, I didn't sell anything. I didn't panic and sell anything. I said, in fact, I bought more because the prices were low. So some people, they'll tinker because they'll have one bad piece of bad news. A great example that I talk about, one of my favorite stocks I own, is Kraft Heinz. And if you look at its chart, it hasn't done anything in 5 years. It's just kind of, 30, 40, 30, 40, 30, 40, 30, 40. But you reinvest premiums and you reinvest dividends, and it's glorious. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic.
Well, let's talk about that. Munger says what you need is a well thought out strategy. So we got to go to break, but when we come back, let's hear some of your well thought out strategies for compounding and really teach the audience things Andy does, not necessarily things that the audience should do. Education, not
we'll do it.
Not advice. All right,
that's
let's
easy.
do that right when we get back. All right, thanks, Andy.
Way easy. Awesome.
All right, welcome back to Rich Dad Stockcast with Andy Tanner, and I'm sure you remember, but Andy Tanner was going to teach us some of his well thought out strategies, as Charlie Munger says, and what we
well thought out.
That's what it says, and you said you had some for us, but this is really focused around compounding. So lay it on us, Andy.
So this is important, and my fear is that people, why would they resist compounding? Why would they say, well, I don't want to do that? Well, because it takes patience, right? It's a huge payoff. I mean, it's a massive payoff, but we live in a world, unfortunately, where we want to lose 30 pounds in a week, or, we want, the meal in the microwave in 2 minutes. We don't want to, when I do a burger on the weekends, it takes me about 3 hours the way I do it. And it's glorious. I mean, it's incredible, right? It's got several steps to get in perfection, and it's worth the wait. Right. So good things come to those who wait. Patience is a virtue, but that's not human nature. So one of the reasons I'm probably, one of the things I probably struggle with is I'm pretty pragmatic, and I really like stuff that's true. And usually out on the internet, there's not a lot of truth there, simply because sometimes the truth is not as exciting to people. But I think compounding is way exciting, especially when you hit that hockey stick part. So to answer your question, what are some things? Number one,
Wait,
stop.
I'm sorry, and I know this is why the audience is listening, but you said something in there that kind of triggered a backlash in my head.
Good.
And I wanted to tell you two other reasons people might not compound. One is I finally found something that's working for me, and I don't want to mess with it, right? If it's making me money, I don't want to pull the money out. I want to just keep it right where it's working because I'm afraid I can't find another place to put it.
But they would. I don't understand that, because why would someone think that way? If you have a cash in the box that's feeding you cash, all you're doing is putting your money back into that to buy more of that good thing, right? You say, "Hey, I've got this good thing going." Well, it's giving you cash.
In that case, you just keep buying the same asset. If you you have plenty of financial education, but let's say I don't, and I don't have the education to find a second asset. So
then you're screwed. Then you're screwed. Yeah. If a person says, like anyone that says, well, I don't want to learn anything, or I don't have education, but make me rich. I've never met anyone that has gone from poor to rich without learning something. And which really brings into the first well thought out idea. I would stop giving my money to Wall Street to do this for me immediately. I would never, ever, ever give those guys my cash. Here's why. If you take a compounding calculator and you look at your entire investing life, so let's say I start working, around 20 years old, and I die at 85. So I have 65 years of compounding potential for a legacy for myself and my family. 65 years, that's a long time. And if I give even 0.5% or 1% of that compounding power to Wall Street, they're going to take anywhere from a fourth, to half to 80%. If you give them 2.5%, they'll take 80% of that compounding power away. So the first way to increase your compounding power is, instead of investing and giving an extra 2-3% to Wall Street, keep that 2-3% for yourself, because they're not any good at it anyway. And even if you're not educated and you just bought the S&P 500, you're going to do better. We've said on this show many times, it's in the Spiver report, that the actively managed funds do not do as well as the idiot who just buys the S&P. So that move alone, if you if you follow the advice, you'll actually have a lot of fun. If you will go to investor.gov and type in compound calculator and start to play with those numbers and timeframes and percentages, it's actually a really exciting exercise. It's a lot of fun, because you think, wow, look what the difference is, and the power of the compounding is insane. And if you I'll give you the John Bogle's example we've used on this program before. If you take $1,000 and invest it for that 65-year lifetime, and you don't even add to it, you just compound at 8%, right? And it just grows at 8%. That's $148,000 of compounding power. If you do 5.5, meaning 2.5% to Wall Street's 30 grand, 32,000. So you lose $116,000 of compounding power out of the 104. The vast majority goes to Wall Street. So you absolutely, the first thing, if you want to compound more effectively, take that couple percentage that is just huge and keep it for yourself instead of giving it to them. That's number one.
Okay. That's something you cover in the webinar. We mentioned it earlier, but double your income that you said you'd already made, and we're going to put in the show notes.
I don't cover it in that, but that's what I would say here. What I can tell you in that, what you can learn about in that webinar, is, let's say that I decide to get a dividend. And this is really foreign for people to understand. And I recommend them watch this webinar, because I could just scream, what most people think, it's about buying a stock low and watching the stock price go up. And it just makes me freaking nuts. If you look at Warren Buffett's, look around at every successful investor, from Kenny McElroy to Robert Kiyosaki to Warren Buffett, Kenny doesn't wake up in the morning and say, what's my project worth? I got this 200 unit, apartment building, family housing. What's the price of this worth? He says, how much rent? What's the net operating income? How much rent are we bringing in opposed to the expenses? It's all about the cash flow. If you look at Warren Buffett, and he wakes up and he says, you own Fruit of the Loom underwear. It's not even listed. Like, I don't wake up and ask my rental properties. I don't ask what they're worth today because they're not on the multiple listing service. They're not listed on the multiple listing service. There's not a price on them. There is no price. You get these idiots calling me up 5 freaking times a day. Do you own this property? You own this property? Yeah, I own them, but there's not a for sale sign on there. They're hoping I'll be emotional and get rid of it and put a price on it. There is no price on my real estate. For those of you that keep calling me every freaking day, there is no price on it. It's not listed. Well, many of Warren Buffett's companies are not listed on the stock exchange. There's no price. There's no price on Dairy Queen. There's no price on See's Candy. There's no price on Fruit of the Loom, Geico, RC Willey, about a dozen others. There is no price on those. He's getting rich because those companies do work. They give value to the world. The world gives them money, and they take that income and they buy more of those companies to do the same. So when you buy a listed company, and Buffett owns a bunch of those, Apple, Chevron, Moody's, American Express, Occidental Petroleum. You look at all those he owns that are listed. It's as if he doesn't care that they're listed. What's the cash flow coming in? And he loves dividend paying stocks. So they divide that money and they send it to you. They divide it in real estate. They distribute it. It's the same thing. And you take that money. Now, how do you double that number or triple that number? That's where the options market comes in. I don't think I would be interested in stocks if there wasn't an options market, because the options market does a couple things for me. Number one, it offers me.
This is your second tip for
compounding? It offers you protection at times if you need it. But more importantly, it gives you a chance for additional cash flow. And it's beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about. They can watch the webinar and learn it if they care. But
wait, do you have rants in the webinars? Because I think you just finished one.
I may have. Greg, I'm telling you, every day as a teacher, I would be in real trouble. I would never punch anyone in the nose or poke them in the eye, but I have thought about it before. Just saying, hey, it's not about price. It's not about the price. It's about the income. So let's take this for an example. One of my favorite examples I use in what one do I use in the webinar? I can't remember. I think it's probably Dow. So I bought some Dow chemical coming out of COVID. Average company. This isn't a technological breakthrough. They make chemicals. They make everything. Everything, the paint, the carpet, everything in this room comes from Dow Chemical. They make the stuff that helps people make stuff that you can, buy. Your dashboard of your car, somewhere in there's some Dow Chemicals in that, right?
Right.
And, its dividend is decent. It's probably a 4 or 5% dividend. Okay, that's fine. And people are going to say, well, that won't even keep up with inflation halfway, blah, blah, blah. But here's what they don't get. If you write covered calls on that, or even some cash covered puts on that, and I'm actually more aggressive to where I'll even write some more aggressive options on it, that thing can pay for itself in 5 years. It can pay for itself in 5 years. And now that asset is 100% paid for, and you take all that cash flow and you buy another asset, and that's called compounding. And if you can double over the dividend or triple in the case of Dow, which we've done, the numbers go crazy. Okay, you add just here's your homework assignment. Go to investor.gov or just type in compounding calculator into Google and just take $1,000 and compound it over your life, and then add 2% or pull 2% out, or create a variance of 2%. I mean, shoot, we should do it. We should do it right here. It's astounding what the difference is. It's absolutely crazy. So if you can double the amount of cash flow you pull from dividends, from premiums. It just your hockey stick is like this. That's why it's worth learning, options. Now, is that tinkering? I don't think it is, because if you look at Munger and Buffett, they will. I'll give you an example. BASF, what is it? BNSF, the tray. Is it BNSF? I can't remember what it's, Santa Fe, whatever it is. They had a railroad, and the price of the stock was at $80. And they said, hey, we'll buy it at 75. They got paid $14 million to make that promise. And they did it several times. And eventually they bought the entire railroad that way. So they accelerated and doubled their cash flow off whether they would have got from a dividend on it by simply promising to buy it. I mean, $14 million is nothing to sniff at, or nothing to snuff at to say, 14 million. That's a lot of money even for them to get paid.
Right.
To like, it takes a while for BNSF. That's a lot of train running to make $14 million, right? And they got paid that in addition, just up front. So that accelerates their compounding efforts with cash flow. That gives them $14 million to go buy something else. And eventually they bought a controlling interest where they controlled the entire railroad. They controlled the whole thing, and they took it over.
So I have a quick question for you. You just briefly mentioned it, and I might have misunderstood this, but you were talking about a stock. I think it was Dow, and after 5 years, you're able to basically have an infinite return. Do you wait for the infinite return before you compound, or can you be compounding along the way?
Well, you're gonna, every time you get a dividend, or every time you get a premium, you're reinvesting it, right, in something else. And you could buy the same stock, buy more shares, or you can buy a different stock. It doesn't matter. The idea is the discipline of reinvestment, and the idea of pulling more cash out of that than the normal guy does to compound faster. And I would say that, clicking a mouse and demanding premium every month is the fastest way I've ever seen to have income come into a person's life. Like, it is like, if I want to have an investing contest with someone, they say, all right, we're going to see in the next 3 minutes how much money we can make. Okay. That's where I would go. I would sell options, and boom, I would have cash flow in 3 minutes. But it does take education. And if a person says, well, I don't know about all that stuff. Well, learn about all that stuff, right? Well, I don't want to learn all that stuff. Okay, well, then stay at a job. It's that simple.
Enjoy your 401k.
Yeah, I mean, as an education advocate, I always land there, because one of the things I really believe is that rich people get rich not because of what they bought, because of what they know. Buffett didn't get rich because he bought stocks. There's a lot of people get their ass kicked in stocks, right?
Right.
Buffett made money in stocks because of what he knew. And Munger, I mean, their temperament. And that knowledge, that temperament comes from what we call personal development. Is the thing I've loved about entrepreneurship and investing, is that it finds my weaknesses. It will root out your weaknesses and show them to you in terms of temperament, in terms of ignorance. It'll show you what you don't know, and it'll show you where your emotional flaws are.
Right.
And so that constant development, you not only build a bigger bank account, you build a better person. I hope, at least I hope I hope I'm a better person 10 years from now than I am today. Hopefully, a lot of room for improvement.
Robert says, you can take my car, you can take my house, but I have the knowledge, and you can't take that from me. So if I lost everything, it wouldn't matter, because I can rebuild it. Yeah. Because he has the knowledge. I mean,
we should do a show. I don't think we have time for it on this one, but we should do a show on leverage as well. Because if you want to become wealthy, the principle of compounding is the most powerful force in the universe, but it takes time. If a person gets discouraged and says, well, I'm 55 years old, I've only got 10 years to go before I'm 65, and I'd like to retire at 60, I only got 5 years, you're not going to be able to have that patience that Munger talks about. Those guys are 90, and Buffett started when he was 14.
Right.
So, the reason he's got $200 billion in his pocket is he started at 14, and he's just been consistent throughout. and he's had some home runs, but he's had years where he lost 48%, right? Too. He's had ups and downs. But that 90 years, minus 14, so he's been, 76 years he's been compounding. You put 76 years in a compounding calculator, you're going to have a hard time not becoming rich at any rate of return.
Right.
But if a person is later on, then they're going to have to do this. And I was talking about this before we went to break, and I had to bring it up again. I hate the idea of a corporate pension, especially defined benefit. So many people want to go back to defined benefit. If you look at a financial statement of a person receiving a defined benefit, there's two empty columns, assets and liabilities. The asset column is not compounding, and the liability column is not using leverage. So the utility of the balance sheet doesn't exist. And those are the two biggest one-two punches in wealth building is compounding and leverage. And you combine those two together, then you're Kenny McElroy. I mean, you're total stud, at that point. And that's why I hate, that's E quadrant stuff, right? That's total E quadrant stuff. Pensions and 401ks, they don't compound. 401ks don't compound because the fees go to Wall Street instead of reinvesting yourself. And the liability column is empty. There's no utility, so you're not accelerating. So debt is your accelerator, right? So if you can't do the patience like Munger says, do the debt and use that as the accelerator and learn about infinite return.
But when we have to wrap, but if you're going to use debt, you better get really educated.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to buy an asset, you got to get educated and work on your temperament.
Right. Well, you might do that because you're the one ranting all the time.
Okay. Right, you got me. You touche. Right. That was a nice rejoinder.
It was great talking to you again.
Thanks, Greg. Go compound, everybody.
I'll talk to you next week.
Podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.